Hello, good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Vishal Varia from JG Ahmedabad, and welcome to today's session for JG APEC Staying Connected 7.0. And together with me, I have Murtaza Sinnar from Dubai, and we are going to have a session on building a second brain. So, over to you, Murtaza.
Thank you, Dr. Vishal Varia, and welcome everyone for this session. I'm sure a lot of you must be wondering what this title is and how does this link to Google Drive or even to the Google Educators group. Okay. But before I dive into the building a second brain, I would love to see a few ideas on what you think this session would be about. Dr. Dr. Vishavaya, what do you think building a second brain is all about?
Well, as of now, what I see is that we are trying to use technology to help us in our day to day task. And this is what it is. Subtopic, until you make it clear, we can't come to know.
Yes, so this is all about taking the aid of technology to make our lives much more easier. I know on the internet today, there's a whole hype about chat gpt and how just putting a prompt on the chat gpt can give you a whole lesson plan, whole essay, and how ai could really help to write blogs, to articles, to even books, I assume now. And that's the power of what technology can do. It's about how you can utilize that power there. So, building a second brain is actually a concept by Thiago Forte. There's a book which recently came out 2 months ago, and it's one of my favorite books. He has been building up on this concept on his blog for the last 4 or 5 years, and now he has condensed this to an online course and a book. And what the premise of the book is all about how you can use digital storage, cloud storage, or even an external drive to store the information and knowledge which you read. And the pain point we have as individuals, as educators, as students, as working professionals, and more specifically as educators, which come under the category of knowledge workers, we consume a lot of knowledge and information. There is a challenge of information overload. Just if you look at me as a person, I would be reading books on Kindle, paper books, then I would be going to the web and reading at least 4 or 5 articles, blogs, would be on LinkedIn, Twitter, consuming knowledge, having great ideas, bouncing on that. I would have my notes from my classes, meetings, and photographs, screenshots, conversations with other knowledge workers, educators, and all of that just goes and sits sometimes in my brain, which I tend to forget after a few hours, or it goes and sits on my desktop. Now, what happens is after a week, 2 weeks, and a month, that desktops and especially the downloads folder and the bookmarks on Google Chrome have become so much overloaded that I never get a chance to go back to that. And if I have to clean my desktop, I do a very simple trick: collect all my files and store it in a new folder called new folder. That's how I clean my desktop. And if you won't believe, I have a hard disk which is almost 1 GB, 1 TB of data, and I wouldn't have even read or gone through 100 MB of that data. So how we can organize our life, how we can organize the information to make it useful. Okay, moving from a consuming mentality to creator mentality. Okay, and that's all today's session is about. It's all about removing the information overload and creating this digital storage solution. Now, before I move in there, I want to tell you a story about a German professor, philosopher called Nicholas Luhmann. Okay, he wrote around 90,000 notes in his lifetime. And today, his notes are getting published into books, journal papers, and so on. So, if I could share my screen. And that's this idea about Nicholas Luhmann was taken in the book by Sonke Arons on how to take smart notes. Okay, if you find if you have to recommend a book to your students on how to improve learning memory, I think this is a small short book on how to make notes better in the classroom. And he uses this idea. So he had, I'm talking about the years 1930s, and he started teaching as a professor of philosophy. And whenever he used to read something, he used to start making this notes. All these index cards which you see on my screen. Dr. Waya, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
So he used to start making those notes. So whatever he used to read, he used to write on one on each note, and then he used to label the notes. Now, the way he used to label them was number one, two, and so on. But also he used to give a tag or a topic. So if he writes a note on design thinking, one of the criteria was the principle of atomicity, or one atomic idea in one note. So not more ideas called clubbed together, one note, one idea. And then he used to keep building that. Now, with design thinking, if he had read another article which was related to empathy or testing, then he would add another tag to it. Now, if he found out after a few days that there was another article which sits in the middle of these two ideas, then he would add another tag and he would label that tag. And then he would have kind of table of context which you see at the bottom, where tag one, which could be design thinking, are notes one, two, one of one, two of two. Now, his system was very much a librarian system on the way librarians index their books and they put a tag there. But when he used to start publishing his papers or writing his articles, he used to start going through these notes and he would never have this writer's block, or how I'm going to write an article or condense my knowledge about design thinking into one page. You just go through these notes and condense them and just give his inputs, and there you go, his article was ready. And today scientists are all digitalizing these notes, and the AI is trying to create articles based on his knowledge from those 900,000 notes which he has created. Coming to our discussion about building a second brain, Dr. Warya, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What, according to you, are your daily task lists?
My daily task list comprises of multiple things.
Hmm?
Specifically, to start doing things at school, my day
Hmm?
starts with what needs to be announced, what needs to
So,
be done, prepared for the next day, what
announcement.
lectures are to be given, where the lectures are there, what class, what lectures are there, anything to be distributed to the staff members in terms of task, like delegation of the task, and so on.
Okay. So let me go. So you have your task distribution of task to teachers,
Yes.
planning for your. So when you say planning for the day, what specific? Can you be a little more specific here?
So, like, if I need to go to the bank, if I need to visit any of the government department, if I need to pay any bills,
And what about your personal task? What does a personal task in a day look like?
a personal task like something, whether where to take something at home while going back to home, I have to bring some groceries, take some groceries at home. At times, I have a duty of picking up my child from the school.
And is that something which you do on a daily basis of picking
No,
up your
not on
child?
daily basis. It's occasional.
It's occasional. Okay, that's interesting. And how do you rate your day in terms of stress level? Is it always quite a lot, and you have something or the other which is left in your task list, which goes to the next day?
Not much. So far as stress level is concerned, then you can consider 50 to 60% stress level. Most of the task gets finished, but if I get lesser time for my own work, like preparing for notes or something, that goes on to the next day.
So your own work is not a part of your task list then.
It is a part of the task list, but it takes on the next priority because if I have to go to the bank, yes, I have to visit the bank. I cannot move it on to the next day. If I have to delegate a task to the staff, it has to be done before I start my own work. So my own work is of the less priority on personal nature.
And I think this is that's a very valid point you made, and this is happening with most of us, where our own personal task is actually overtaken by the task of our colleagues and all that which gets piled up on us. Uh,
Right.
Even about sometimes it's as teachers, I get less time preparing for my lesson plan and more time replying to parents' emails and queries. So these are kind of the issues we have in our day-to-day life. And what building a second brain does is it takes you through that journey. Okay. Now there are different systems. Just let me show my slide back. So there are different systems which take you through that productivity journey, right from David Allen's Getting Things Done. But today we're going to talk about just two concepts. Okay. And what I love about these two concepts are they are very simple to use. Okay. The first one is about digital fluency. So I've always heard this concept, and Gujarati માં કહે છે પૈસા બનાવવા ને પૈસા નાખવા પડે. Okay.
True. To
Imagine
earn money,
that
you have to pay money. Yeah.
time, if you want more time on your hand, you have to give time to learn these tricks and tasks. Okay. Now I know there are teachers who say, okay, why should I learn keyboard shortcuts? Why should I learn how to go to that Google Educator level? It's because it's going to make you more productive. It's going to reduce the time which you spend on creating those things in a much more effective way. Okay. And the other one is called code, which is nothing to do with coding, but how do you capture information all the way up to expressing information? Okay. So these are the two things we're going to look at. First is how to be digitally fluent, and the second is the code. Okay. If you want to go a little more deeper into the whole building a second brain, you can always go and get the book from Amazon, and also go and view the course by Thiago Forte on it. Okay. So let's look at the first one, and this is something which we do, but we do it in packets rather than as a process. So what does code mean? It stands for capture, organize, distill, and express. Okay. Capture, organize, distill, and express. That's what the acronym code means. Okay. Now, to take you to an example, I'm going to share my screen. And Dr. Wari, I will need your help here.
Yes.
To give me a website or a blog or an article which you would want to search and read.
Mm, I would wish to read about articles on artificial intelligence helping us to create images.
Artificial intelligence images. Okay. I'm going to take a quick article from here. Let me take this one. Okay. Now, the first thing which I do from the code is the capture. Okay. And I'm going to take this article here, artificial intelligence is everywhere. Now,
Right.
what I would normally would do is I would read this article, maybe copy paste a few lines of what stands out for me, or sometimes just bookmark this in the reading panel and leave it. Okay. But what you could do is just with a very simple extension on Google Keep, you can make a quick note on this. So I could add a title called AI in Education. I could I could just say, okay, sunset pictures on Google Photos is something which AI does. Okay, and I could have a quick tag on it. So make my notes. I can create a quick tag. Now, what this goes and does is it creates not just a quick note, but it takes that website for you to then refer back when you're looking at your notes. So
Okay.
next time, whenever you're reading an article, you can have this extension open on the right hand side. Just type in the notes there, and then you always have the reference website to that article. Okay?
Okay.
So you can easily capture it without forgetting where have you captured it from. Okay. Now let's look at one more example. Now instead of a blog, you're reading a PDF article. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the future of education report, which was recently published by Google. Have you read that, Dr. Varia?
Yeah, not really.
There are three parts of the report which was recently published. And I'm trying to use, I personally use other tools like Notion and Notion Web Clipper, but for today's session I'm trying to keep it to the free tools and to the Google ecosystem. And this
Yeah.
is the whole report on future of education. Okay. Now, Thiago Forte has this concept of progressive summarization. Okay. And what it stands for is, so this concept of progressive summarization. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So this is the concept of progressive summarization, which if you can use it along with your students in the classroom, they'll be able to retain a lot more information. Okay. And what it does is when you're reading an article, if you're trying to make conclusions and come to interference with the article, you will you will understand the article lesser and you will remember it less because you're increasing cognitive load on your brain while reading the article. What it tells you is, yes, you can make notes on there, but you can, once you have made your notes, you take them and put it in, say, Google Docs. Then the first layer is your notes. The second layer, you're trying to, when you create a note, what's the purpose of the note? That you're going to use it or utilize it somewhere in a later life. So you're creating the notes for the future self. As a students, I'm creating notes so that one day before my exam or 2 days before my exam, I can use it for revision. If you
Right.
have if you have copy pasted the whole 50% of the chapter in your notes, you're not even going to able to revise or retain any of that 1 or 2 days before exam. Okay. And as adults, if you're trying to prepare a lesson plan, you would want to say, okay, if I can pick up this article 5 years later, I should be able to quickly understand what this article says. And that's where layer number two, layer number three comes in. So you use the bolding passages. So whatever highlights from your article, you can bold it. Okay. So what I could do is, let me finish this part and I'll do a hands-on after that. Okay, so you're going to use the Control B, Command B on your laptop to bold the article. The next is, then you can use the highlighter to then from the bolded parts, just highlight the parts which are there. So 5 years later, when you open that, Just looking at the 5 or the 6 keywords which are highlighted from your article, you will find out what this article was supposed to convey to me 5 years later. Okay. Now,
Great.
to do this is actually a lesson plan by Google on applied digital skills. So you can take this example of progressive summarization by Thiago Forte. There's a great article and a video on his website explaining this. If you want to use it in a classroom, you can. There's a whole lesson plan on from applied by digital skills which tells you, okay, you can annotate the idea in highlight and dark blue, and greens is where you annotate the definition. And this is a solid example on how a student would then make notes and highlight it. This that would be, and this is the complete lesson plan. Is my screen visible, right?
Yes.
With the lesson plan, Dr. Varia?
Yes, yes, it's visible. I can see the chart here with layer 1 is notes, layer 2 is bold passages, layer 3 is highlighted passages.
So
If this
this
is the
is
screen, is
this is the
another
lesson
screen?
plan which I'm talking about from digital
Yeah, I can
applied
see now.
digital skills,
Yeah, yeah, it's
and
in.
this is the teacher guide for that. Okay. So how
Right.
would you analyze that the students have understood how to highlight things? And we always have this conversation about, will AI take our job? No, AI will not take our job. But people who learn AI skills or learn these skills about connecting, how to connect knowledge and information together, will be able to survive in the future. Okay. Now let's look at the last part about, so is there any questions related to this, Dr.
Not at
Varia?
the point. Not at the point, Murtaza.
Okay. Now let's look at the next part of the building a second brain, and
Yeah.
that's the core. It's called, there's an acronym for that called para. There you go. Okay. And para is an acronym by Thiago Forte, which stands for projects, areas, resources, and archive. Okay. Now, the question you would have in your mind is, you talked about having an external storage and storing it. How do I actually do it? Okay. Now, what we normally do is we tend to create folders based on topics. So I would have a folder on English, I would have a folder on maths, I would have a folder on history, I would have a folder on grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And I would put the relevant information in that. But what it leads to is, it leads to all the information which could be from the last 3 years to current all mixed up in there, and it it creates a hindrance for you to then create or use it in your current projects. Okay. To give you an example, I would be teaching maths 4 years ago, but now I've changed my subjects to teach science. So my current projects should all be related to science, and that should be easily accessible for me. Okay. I'm going to take
Yes.
Dr. Varia's example on the task list which he told from his day-to-day life. Okay. Now, if you notice that that's a quite a long task list, right from planning your day to allocating work to your teachers to picking up groceries and and the kids. But that's where para comes in. Okay. So let's look at the first part of the para, and I'm going to open my Google Drive for it. Okay. So what I do is I create these 4 folders in my drive: projects, areas, resource, and archive. I I tend to use a number in front of them so that it gets sorted easily. And I can just right click on them, go to change color, and I just change the color of it. Okay. Now let's look at the first part, which is projects. Okay. So projects is something which you're working on currently and today. Okay. Like for example, Dr. Varia is trying to write an article for his newsletter about how artificial intelligence is using it in images. So he would go into projects, he would create a new folder, AI in images, okay? And then whatever research work he would then start doing, he would just all push it into this folder. So on by next week, when he is ready to write his newsletter to share it to the parents or the teachers, he has all his information collected in one place under the topic of AI and images, which is his project. Okay, he has a visit of one of the ministers in his school, and he has to create an agenda for the minister right from his day to what he's going to observe and what are the points to be needed. So he would create minister a new folder called minister's visit, and he would have anything which is related to that into this folder. Okay. Now let's come to the next layer of para, which is areas. Areas is something which Dr. Warrior does on a day-to-day basis. Okay, and it's a standard which he has developed for himself as those tasks. Like for example, dedicating work to the teachers. That's not something which he's going to do today and not do tomorrow. That's an ongoing task, and he has to maintain that whenever I give a task to a teacher, it has to be at a certain quality level. Okay, to give a day-to-day example, your project today would be, okay, today is a Sunday and I want to make makhni dal or palak paneer today. That's a project. You're going to make it today. You're not going to keep making palak paneer for the whole week. But the area which is the next part is cooking. You're going to be cooking every day. Now, it depends on how good or bad a cook you are, but you have a standard that my food should at least be eatable by my family members. So that's what area is. So according to what Dr. Varia mentioned about his daily tasks, if I would take distribution of teachers, that would change to a color of green then. Okay, because that's something which he does on a daily visit. Okay, now coming back, Dr. Varia, if you had to change another one to green, what would that be? Can you now tell me one of the area in your life? I think you're on mute.
So you mean to say any of the folders, or you need to say any of the task?
Any of the tasks which you have to, which happens on a day-to-day basis, every day you have to do that.
Yeah, that's a delegation of work to the staff members.
Members, yeah. Okay, now once you start removing these kind of daily activities from your task list, what happens then? Your task list becomes manageable and small. It becomes 3 or 4 things which are your projects which you have to do today and gets over. Now, one another example of what would fall under projects and what would fall under area. Projects is something which has a deadline. Area is something which does not have a deadline. Okay,
Yes,
if I have to cook butter chicken or I have to cook palak paneer, mane aje rate jammanu છે. I can't be
right.
cooking that tomorrow. So that's a project which I have to do. In terms of area, I need to take care of my health. I need to maintain my health. So I need to go to gym every day, or I need to go for 20 minutes walking. I can't have a deadline for that. That's an ongoing task which I have dedicated to myself. Okay,
Yes.
that's come under projects. The second is area. Now let's look at the third part, which is resources. Okay, what is resources? Resources is something which you collect for a particular project or area which could be shared to others. Like for example, I'll take the example of Dr. Varia's distribution of tasks. So he needs the lesson plans and SOW from his teachers. He has created a template for all the teachers that I needed in this format. That would go and sit under resources. So if a new teacher joins him and he says, okay, can you share me what are your expectations in terms of my SOW? What details you need? He can go to his resource folder, take the SOW and share it to the teacher. Okay. Now, if he's doing an observation for that one particular teacher on next Friday, that same SOW which was filled by the teacher would then go and sit under his projects folder, because that has a deadline that he has to observe the teacher next Friday, and it has customized version of that SOW which goes and sits under projects. Okay. And tomorrow, for example, you came to my house and you love palak paneer, and you're like, can you share the recipe of palak paneer with me? That recipe of palak paneer would then go and sit under resources. Okay. In terms of health, okay, what is your diet plan? I want to know your diet plan. Now, I wouldn't be comfortable of sharing my personal diet plan to an unknown person. But if I would have taken the diet plan of Rujuta Devekar and I have her copy, that would go and sit under resources, but my personalized diet plan would go and sit under areas. So I
Okay.
hope the difference between areas and resources, areas is something which is more personal to you, resources is something which is more generalized to you. Like, you have
Okay.
taken a lesson plan from Twinkle or online, that would go and sit under resources. But once you have
Right.
edited and modified that, that would go and sit under areas or projects based on whether it has deadline or no. And the last is archive. The minister visit is done, he has gone happy. Now you don't need that. That's not an ongoing task which you need to monitor. So that folder will go and sit under archive, which is your past projects. Now 2 years later, there's another minister who comes. What happens is you can go back to archive and retrieve all the templates of the minister's visit you had made that time, and then modify it to the current date. So anything which is not getting used on a day-to-day basis would then go and sit on the archive. The last folder is by created automatically by Google Classroom. So you leave that. So these are the four things about Para. Para
Right.
means projects, areas, resources, and archives. And you can see how clean and clear my Google Drive will then start being made. Okay. Like for now, for this session, I had to create some resources for building a second brain, which was specific for this resources. I created this folder and I put everything which was inside it. Okay, what were my checklists? What my lesson plan resources? But I already had a lot of materials for my building a resource second brain, which I created before. So then I that goes and sit under resources. All the lesson plan and everything is then sitting under
So
the resource
this,
folder.
yeah, this organization of data is very, very important because unless until you are organized in this particular fashion, you will not be able to find and fetch the relevant data on time.
I How much time do we have more?
Yeah. So we have around next 10 to 15 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Does anyone have any questions related to two
Not at the
concepts?
moment. Not
Not
at
at
the
the moment.
moment.
Okay. I just wanted to recap the two things which I mentioned. So the first one was code, which takes you from capturing, then distilling, capturing, organizing, distilling the information, and expressing the information. Okay. A lot of us stop at the capture point. Okay. We capture some information thinking, oh, I learned something new. You don't learn something new till you actually express it. You write a blog about it, you post about it, you even write it in your diary. But as long as you don't express yourself and uh, distill that knowledge, the knowledge is no longer with you. The second topic we talked about was Para, which is organizing your Google Drive. Okay. Now, what I do is I have the Google Drive linked to my computer. So I have the same four folders on my computer. So I do not have a duplicate. So anything which goes and sits on my computer is automatically there on my drive, and vice versa. And
Right.
to do the distilling of information, we looked at a specific concept called progressive summarization, which is about capturing your notes, then bolding your notes, then highlighting your notes, and then revisiting your notes to make your own. So these were the three concepts we looked at, and I think I that's all I wanted to share from building a second brain.
So, indeed, great, Murtaza. I think what you have shared today is basically a meta data or a metacognition concept that we all know it's not about technology, but it's about using the technology in the right manner. So how should we use the technology in a right manner so that technology will be helpful to us on that point in time when we need it.
Yeah,
So I'm really fascinated to know about this acronym called CODE and PARA. So this is really great, and it was indeed great to interact with you, Murtaza. You have anything, any message for the viewers apart from this?
I think one of the things where I struggled to do para initially was that I tried to take everything which I had previously and then put it in my new system. Okay, I what I would recommend that is that creates a lot of workload for you and demotivates you to move to a new organization system. So what you do is you have whatever existing material in a separate folder, and then start creating folders from now on. Okay,
Right,
a lot of people, what they do is they would create, okay, I have 10 projects which are coming up, I'll all create the folders and keep it ready. Okay, I believe in more of just in time methodology, the Toyota manufacturing method, where you have a new project, you create a folder on the same time, and then you start inputting the resources there. So not overwhelming what you already have, but just take a
yes,
new fresh start and start slowly by making one folder which you would put under projects, something which you're going to do daily. Now look at your whole day's task and see, okay, what do I do daily which I don't need to stress about, and put it under areas. Anything which you find interesting, you want to read on a later date, put it under resources, and everything else would then start automatically going into archive. But a simpler folder system for your life, not just in school but in your personal life too.
right, right. So thanks, Murtaza. Indeed, a nice concept that we have learned today. આજે કંઈક નવું શીખ્યા. ટેકનોલોજી કેવી રીતે કામ કરે છે એના કરતાં ટેકનોલોજીને કેવી રીતે કામે લગાડવી અને કેવી રીતે એને કામમાં ઉપયોગમાં લેવી, that is what we have learned today. So thanks to you, Murtaza, and I'm thankful to all those who actually have joined for today's session. And yeah, please stay tuned. We'll be upcoming with our next uh, session at around 4. You have anything to share, Murtaza?
I also run a small cohort of students for this building a second brain. Okay,
Okay,
45 minutes માં થઈ જાતું ને એમ. So I run a small on Google Classroom only. I assign task and run it. So if someone would be interested to do a 1 week cohort on actually implementing this, and I
right.
want guidance for this, I do run that, so they can connect with me on my Twitter at Maker Murtaza, or any of the social medias there.
Yeah, great, great. So thanks, Murtaza, for sparing your valuable time with us, and we shall be back for the viewers at around 4 p.m. Thanks for joining with us. So Murtaza, kindly stay back. We'll just have some discussion.
Sure.
Thank you.